Well, hi everyone. Welcome back to our 40th episode of the RTI Speed Tips with Bob and Chad. How's it going, Chad?
We're doing good.
Another busy Monday, I bet.
Mondays are always exciting around here, yes.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's kind of the way it was around here today. We were just, everybody was kind of going in a different direction, and things were pretty much at a rapid pace. And thinking to myself, I pressed some bushings and some stuff today, and that's about more than what I was thinking about doing. Of course, I get to do all the errands and run after this, run after that, go do this, go do that, which I appreciate. That's part of my job. But sometimes it's like, yeah, I got stuff to do. But anyway, got to talk to a couple buddies in Texas today on some chassis stuff. And so that was kind of fun, all RTI related stuff, the Bob and Chad episode stuff. I've been getting quite a few calls actually from customers and stuff that watch this, and I appreciate everybody complimenting what we do, and it's pretty exciting, and I'm quite sure you probably ran into that. So tell me about 141. I didn't get there this year.
Neither did I.
Oh, you didn't?
No, Austin and Tanner and Billy went Tuesday on the factory support tour, and so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday there, and then they went straight to Cedar Lake. And when I got done with work Friday, then I went up to Cedar Lake and joined them up there. So 141 was good. I watched most of it on TV. It was pretty cool. Johnny Whitman finally got her, and Cedar Lake was a good show as usual. They've done a lot of improvements to that place, and it was really good racing. So fun weekend.
I've heard great things about Cedar Lake. I haven't been there in years, and even back then it was a stellar place to go. I mean, the racing's always been pretty good, and they put on a real good show. So, but I haven't, like I said, I haven't been there recently, so I really can't attest to that. Getting ready to go on the Minnesota tour. We leave Thursday morning for Princeton. And then Bobby and I are going to be going to there, and then going up to Brainerd for the 2 days, and then coming back to Granite City. Never been to Granite City. Never been to Brainerd. Bobby's been to Brainerd and Princeton. I've been to Princeton. I went there a few times a few years back with Dave King when it was still with soda stuff. So looking forward to that, getting up there to see some of those people. A lot of people going. I mean, the list. I looked at the list last Friday, and Phillips and Graybill are going up there. Dotson's going up there. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty good group of racers. So that's exciting. Jake McBurney's going. Tim Ward, I see, is going. So that'll be fun. Different environment. I haven't been up north for quite some time. Like I said, Bobby kind of wants to do a little fishing in the off time there, so we're going to have to hope that maybe some of our buddies from up in there are listening so they can tell us where's a good place to go. What's new and exciting at Wehrs Machine? Anything new?
Just plugging away. It's been busy. We're trying to catch up like everybody. Seems like the whole racing industry is busy and behind, and everybody's kind of overwhelmed with what's going on in the racing industry. But we're plugging away. We're out of a few part numbers, but we're thrashing, trying to get back to our normal zero backorder policy that I like so much. I the whole time I've been involved here, I've wanted to have zero back orders, and if you're going to make something, you should have it on the shelf, I feel. So
Sure.
It's been a little trying in the last 6, 7, 8 months here, but we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the way we've been here. It seems like a guy will order 7 parts, and we've got 6 of them. And it's just like, man, how's that happen? And I'm not saying your parts. I'm just saying it's just like I question. I said, so why don't we have that? Well, they're on order. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. So on tonight's show, hopefully we got some listeners going. We don't have any questions yet, but hopefully we got some listeners going. With it being the 40th episode, we're going to give away one of our trick little gauges here, angle gauges. Some of our RTI t-shirts. And Chad, of course, is going to give away some t-shirts and one of his ball joint removal tools. That was kind of my soapbox from last week on these tools that people need to have in their trailers so they aren't beating and banging on things. So, and we'll let you know, Garrett will randomly pick some of the questions and let us know here about 10 minutes to the end of the show to know who we get to give those things away to. So that'll be exciting. Other than being busy, there really hasn't been a lot of, we're not sitting here with a lot of new stuff. I mean, everything's, like you said last week, it just seems like you don't have time to work on anything that's new and innovative because you're just doing your best to keep up. And that's kind of the way it's been here too. Rocky went up on that North Dakota tour, did real well, won one night and should have won 2 nights. Ended up winning. Eric Laudenschlager, who's one of our customers with a razor car that's got our shock absorbers, ended up winning the tour. Eric's been a good friend of ours for many years, did some seminars with us, and him and Bobby were good friends, and so that was kind of cool to see. We still ended up doing well up there. They were a little short on cars, but the racing was really good. So anything else? Okay, question number 1. Good evening, Jeffrey. We appreciate you watching here. For what purpose would someone want to run their pull bar on the bottom hole of the rear end bracket? Well, it changes the reaction time. What's your opinion on that, Chad?
Yeah, I think it's, there's some guys like to run it low. It's gonna take a stronger pull bar. You'll need a stiffer spring or a stiffer puck package the closer you get to the center line of the axle. But it can be a little bit erratic at time because it's going to be a quicker motion too. So I don't see a lot of cars down there. I know I've seen some guys test it. We did a test once where we thought if we lowered it way down, the pull bar way down, that the car would roll and get more side bite. And we never really gained anything there or learned anything. So pretty much, I think everybody's kind of in that 10, 12 inches above the center line of the axle, and that's kind of the wheelhouse.
That's where we're at. We did some testing just the same, and that's kind of what we found was when you get it closer, you got to go stiffer on spring. When you go stiffer on spring and you're shortening your reaction time, you're making it more finicky. So when you make something more finicky, it's going to be more finicky to track conditions, track changes. It's not going to be as forgivable, but I think there's nights where there's something to that it could definitely be stronger, but I don't think it's got the consistency that I would like to see or what I've found. If you take a 10-night stretch, I think where we've got it now. The big thing that we see, people are still moving it ahead a couple inches. Some people are moving it behind center a couple inches. I don't see the height being moved as much as I do front to back locations. People are kind of doing with that. Let's turn the deal down, Garrett, so I can see what the next question is. How important is it to achieve negative camber on the left front on a Midwest modified? Well, I don't think the left front's probably as crucial, but still you got to remember if the car's balanced, you're going to load that left front. When you go into the corner and you back off the throttle, the whole front end is going to come down. When the whole front end comes down, we want to make sure that when that left front gets traveled downward, because shock movement wise, it's still going to get 2 inches of compression. when you get 2 inches of compression, you're not going to want to lose any tire patch. So we run 4 degrees negative on the left front. That's kind of what we found when you simulate the travel. That's where we seem to felt that you get all the 8 inches of surface on the ground. So I still recommend that. It might not be there for just a split second, but boy, that split second and the way competitive racing is today, it's pretty crucial. Jared, in your opinion, how much is too much stagger on the rear of a modified? When does it hurt corner exit? Well, I've kind of got my own opinion on stagger. I'm one of these guys that I tend to like stagger. Now, I think that's a driver preference. More stagger will definitely hurt you off the corner. But what I've always done is I've actually run a little bit more lead in the car to help it get up off the corner. But I've used the stagger, like especially on a tight racetrack, to try to help the car rotate in the middle. The thing that I have found, you can change your car with a 4-link to get the amount of rear steer that you need. The problem is in Jared races at Marshalltown, but like Marshalltown is a prime example. When you go down to the bottom of the racetrack's pretty flat. When you go up on the banking, it's pretty steep banking, and it's more of a concave type surface. So the car's really got to be a little different at the bottom than it does at the top. Where I've found if you regulate your stagger and not necessarily try to do it with steer, and do it more with stagger, the driver's in control. He can control what the car's going to do with stagger, where, you know, if the car gets 3 inches of roll versus 2 inches of roll, it's going to change the steer. And that's just my opinion. It's probably an old school thing, but I still believe in that. I know a lot of guys still run 2 inches of stagger. I've got a couple customers that they don't like to get over an inch. So it's kind of what, like I said, it's really all about what the driver feels most comfortable with in that situation. How do you help get side bite in an IMCA stock car? Well, in my opinion, Jared, that side bite in a stock car is kind of a weight transfer deal. So you either get side bite with shock absorbers, softer compression shock absorbers. Big thing that a lot of people play with in the IMCA stock car is moving weight up a little higher, moving it a little to the right. Moving weight around is a big deal on those cars because, of course, you know, to get the rear percentage that you want, they do have to have a fair amount of weight put in them, and that gives you, you know, and those cars, 2,900 pounds. I mean, you could have a chunk of weight that was 25 pounds that you could move 8 inches one way or the other and probably have an effect on that car pretty easily. So my first suggestion would be moving weight. Shock absorbers, we do have quite a few customers that are running some soft right rear compression stuff and a little bit more hold down on the rebound side to keep side bite in the car. Jeff, when you lower front ends on an A-mod, if I lower both sides evenly, will the wheel weights stay the same? No, not necessarily. When you say evenly, like say if you take 3 turns out of the right front jack and you take 3 turns out of the left front jack, the wheel weights will not stay the same because your modified is going to be 52 to 54% heavy on the left side. So that means that to get the same weight in effect, you know, I'd have to adjust my weight jacks just a little bit differently because statically I'm starting with a heavier left front to begin with. IMCA Sport Mods, too tight on corner entry to the center, but good on exit in traffic. What changes can help with that? Tight on corner entry can be a situation where the car's getting on the right rear too much. You get too much panhard bar angle in it. Rear end could be maybe a little too far to the left. Those type of things are going to make the car tight on corner entry. Normally when the car's tight on corner entry, it's getting on the right rear before it's getting on the right front. And so the right rear all of a sudden is picking up more side bite. So that would be the area that I would look at in that situation. What's your opinion, Chad?
Possibly from front split.
Yep, that would definitely, putting in you could soften you could soften your left front spring would help the car get into the corner a little better. It's not going to really affect corner exit whatsoever. It's just going to really affect mid corner or corner entry and mid corner. Evening, everyone. How's it going, Justin? Justin runs a 2,900-pound street stock and trying to get more traction off the corner. Center is good. Coming off, it's a little free. Well, I'm not as a metric car. I'm not as familiar what some of the rules are on that situation, but if they allow you to alter the trailing arm brackets on the rear end or anything like that, it's the old adage of putting in a little lead. If you can fix it so that the right trailing arm location is maybe fixing it so that the rear end is maybe a little bit ahead on the right side, that will definitely help the car come off the corner. Other than that, the street stock thing, and I wished I could give you more answers on that situation. Rear weight's going to help if you can put weight in it, but everybody's got, so the street stock stuff is the rules are so split on what you can and can't do, and so I hate to give you something that I might be wrong about. IMC Sport Mod, when adding weight above the rear end between heat and feature, how much would make a noticeable difference? Well, to be honest with you, James, keep in mind your Sport Mod weighs 2,500 pounds or 2,550, whatever the rule is. So a 25-pound chunk is 1%. 25 pounds will be a noticeable difference one way or the other, depending on what you're wanting it to do. If you're adding weight to compensate for fuel loss, which you're burning gasoline, so you'd have to have a lot of yellows to burn 5 gallons of gasoline in that situation. So 5 gallons of gasoline is basically 35 pounds. So like I said, 25 pounds would make a noticeable difference. Trying to increase the rear to tighten up on the throttle. Once again, James, like I said before, if you're having trouble coming off the corner, lead and trail work is a pretty decent adjustment on that. Because keep in mind, with the angle you've got in your left rear compared to your right rear, even if you start with a static lead where the right rear is ahead an 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, it's still in dynamic motion. It's still going to have rear steer in it, so it's going to want to still turn. That just will help the car coming up off the corner. I'm a little cautious sometimes at adding too much weight, because the problem with adding too much weight, when you add weight, you can affect corner entry. And if the car's good going in and through the middle and it's just a little light on tail coming off, I'd work with lead or trailing arm angles. IMC Sport Mod, how do you properly measure the left rear droop and how much is too much? What left rear bar angle is too much? Well, Gary, and this is just my opinion, but I'll tell you kind of how we do it with our cars. Our chain is probably 18 1/4 inches. The downside to that technically means nothing to you, because we don't know for sure where your chain's mounted. We don't know, the rear frame measurements, any of that. So here's kind of what I always tell customers to go by. I like to see my left rear trailing arm angle be in that 25-degree range when the car is sitting in a static motion or static load. But I raise it up, I jack the car up underneath the seat until that trailing arm angle goes to about 45 degrees. And I set my chain at that 45 degrees. Then If the car feels like it's just hiking way too much, then I can choke that chain up a little bit. And if for some reason it feels good and I want to go a little bit more, you could probably give it another 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch of chain. I wouldn't go over 48 degrees on that trailing arm, because once you get to that point, once you really go past 45 degrees, now all of a sudden it's trying to push up. And what it's going to do when it's pushing up, it's going to become kind of a suspension bind. And then all of a sudden the tire is going to start taking the load instead of the suspension doing its changes. Right rear tire AMOD getting way hotter than the left rear. How to fix that? Well, what would your suggestions be, Chad?
Feed the heat.
Feed the heat. I would totally agree. That if the right rear is running hot, that means that right rear tire is spinning. So we need to actually put some traction more in that right rear tire. We can do that with lead. We can do that with trailing arm angle. You could do it, with putting a little bit of weight closer to the right rear tire. Shock absorber changes could definitely help. It just all depends on, you really have to analyze what the car is doing in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. If the car is laying over on the right rear coming up off the corner, maybe we need a little stiffer spring in the right rear because the car's not getting the grip on the right rear. A lot of times tire heat really comes from mid-corner or even in corner entry, depending on how the driver's entering the corner. The car actually could be too tight. And so what's happening is using the brakes to shake the car loose. Well, then the right rear starts to slide and then it starts to spin. I've seen that happen numerous times where customers will have their cars so tight that, like Chad said, feed the heat. Well, we've got so much left rear grip in the thing that it's not getting load on that right rear tire. Applying to Justin's question, we talked about this in depth at the class at Close Racing. Yeah, Jim, and I'm hoping that if everything goes good, we'll be able to get back out there this next year. We didn't get out there last year because of our good old buddy, the CV19. Had a great time out there with you guys, and we look forward to coming back. The possibility is the car is actually too tight on corner entry. Jim, you paid attention in class. I appreciate that, because that's totally true. In Justin's situation, it's very possible that the car could be just too tight, and what happens is you're just trying to break the car loose. I've seen that happen. I mean, trust me, every night I go to the racetrack, I can pick out 5 or 6 cars that they're just too tight. The old adage that we've got in our mind is we've got to feel like that, we had big tires at one time, and spoilers and all this stuff. And so we go into the corner and you feel like you were sticking a blade in the track. It would stick so good. Well, now we've got harder tires, less body work, and we don't have that feel anymore. But what I tell customers is you've got to get to the point where you get accustomed to that looser feel, because the car is going to be faster, and rely that the throttle is going to pull you back underneath you. And if the car's balanced and it's hooked up right and your setup is good, when that car starts to feel a little free on you, if you throttle it back up, it's going to pull itself up underneath you, and the car is going to drive forward. What's the pros and cons of running a softer springs on the front end of a GRT modified? Currently running 550 and 600, wondering what softer springs will do. Well, we've actually, and that used to be our go-to, we've actually went to running softer springs. Now, I don't know what year GRT you're talking about. If you're running the car with Pinto spindles, you're that 525 to 550 range is probably, I don't know if I'd probably go a whole lot softer just because of where the roll center is on that. But if you got one of the newer cars that are running the 3-piece spindles, the roll center on the 3-piece spindles and the 3-piece spindles in general like a softer car. Like Jake McBurney's car, we're running a pair of 500s in the front. Like Jeremy Mills's car's got a little stiffer left front because he likes a little bit more side bite in his car. And so that's kind of one of the things. And that stock car that we were talking about a little bit ago that was talking about side bite, that's another thing you could do is you could stiffen up your left rear 16 GRT by BT. 16 would have the Pinto spindles on it. I'd try a 550 in the left front and a 525 in the right front. I think you'll like the way the car works a little better. I think it's going to drive a little better. With the softer right front, you're going to lose a little bit of drive up off the corner, but I think you're going to pick up more speed on corner entry and through the center that you won't notice the loss in the drive. But anyway, back on that side by thing, the customer had the question a little bit ago on that stock car. That would be one thing you could do also in a stock car, stiffen up the left front spring. That would give you more side bite because that just keeps the load on the right rear a little better. So get the left rear, get the left rear working harder. Yep, that's a good question. How much left side percentage do you think is too much on the scales without a 200-pound driver? Jared, if I give you my opinion, we got to understand your chassis builder probably has a little different opinion, and I would probably go with his. I will tell you how we set our cars up. We set the car up with the driver at 54% left side weight. More than likely, your car with you in it is probably going to be closer to that 55 range, more in that 52 range without you in the car is probably pretty realistic. But once again, 52 to 53 is where your car is probably going to end up. Our stuff, I like a little bit left side weight. Left side weight gets you off the corner. Less left side weight gets the car in tighter and through the middle better. But a more left side weight car definitely will drive up off the corner better. My thing is, I've always believed in the fact that I got to get through phase 1 and phase 2 really good. And if I do that good enough, I'm not concerned about what I'm getting up off the corner because the car technically should be going forward and hooked up. Can you explain more on your lead and trail and your adjustment to achieve that? Well, Andrew, and I'm not with the stock cars, you're kind of like an IMCA stock car that you can actually have 2 sets of holes on the trailing arms on the rear end. In an IMCA Sport Mod or an IMCA Modified, we just adjust the trailing arms. So in other words, like when I'm saying to a customer, let's put 1/8 of an inch of trail in the car. Well, we would lengthen the right rear 1/8 of an inch. We would do that if the car is too tight in the middle of the corner and I'm wanting to help it turn a little bit better coming off. Now, if the car is really good getting in and really good in the middle, then I'd actually want to put lead in the car. And when I put lead in the car, I always lengthen the left side. With the IMCA stuff, or with any modified, you usually have that 72-inch setback rule from the front side of the motor plate to the center of the axle housing. If you do too much to shorten the right side, if you shorten up the right side, what can happen is you can actually alter that measurement and end up with a 71 3/4 measurement, which would get you DQ'd. So when I run trail, I lengthen the right rear. When I run lead, I lengthen the left rear. Factory stock, I think these guys missed us, Chad.
Yeah.
Factory stock metric chassis, suspension-wise, we are like a hobby seller. Stock rear control arm mounts on the frame, no adjustments on the control arm brackets on the rear end. 2 3/4 from the maximum from the tube. If I raise my right rear ride height using a 16-inch spring instead of a 13-inch, will that raise the height and add angle to these stock arms? Yes, it will. Would I notice any bite or forward bite difference? Well, where you're going to really notice the difference is probably on corner entry, because you're going to change your spring table when you raise that up. Now, all of a sudden, it might not roll over as good getting into the corner, but it will definitely get you angle in the trailing arm, and raising the height is definitely something, that's kind of one of the things that you can do, is raise the height on those cars to change the angle in the trailing arm. So that was definitely what I would probably recommend. Would I notice any bite or forward bite? I don't know if you're going to notice a whole lot. When you raise the right rear, you're going to statically load the right rear. So it might be a little freer coming up off the corner. But once again, if it helps the car get in through the middle, I think a guy can sacrifice a little off the corner, because your momentum speed, it's all about momentum racing. So once again, I think that's a definitely. Thanks for the videos. We appreciate it. We appreciate all you guys. Opinion on left rear shock compression. Stiffer compression or less compression adds traction? That's a great question, Ethan. Bobby and I were just talking about that the other day. In my opinion, if the car's set up right and the bars are doing what they're supposed to be, a softer compression shock will put traction in the car. A lot of guys run a stiffer compression shock absorber because they need to keep the bar up on the car up on the bars. Now, if you're trail braking and you're doing everything that you can to keep the car on the bars itself without crutching it with the shock, softer compression shock is going to get you more traction, in my opinion. The stiffer compression shock is used to compensate, to keep the car keep the car up on the bars, which is keep an angle in the bars, and it's all about the angle in the bars where your traction is coming from. Won at Boone. Oh yeah, by the way, Ethan, congratulations, you won at Boone the other night. And I went fishing, and if I'd only thought, I knew I should have went to Boone. I've been at Boone the last 2 nights, and that would have been pretty impressive to be able to sit there and watch you win that race at Boone. So that's pretty cool. Outlaw Angler 8M. What is a good angle to mount inboard the left rear shock on a sport mount? How much is too much angle? Well, the thing that you want to do is simulate your movement in the car. So in other words, kind of rock the car over in the right front, jack it up underneath the seat on the left rear, so that you put the car in kind of a dynamic mode. When the car's in a dynamic mode, you want to make sure that that left rear shock still has about 10 degrees of angle in it, so that it's pushing more towards the center on the top and more towards the right rear or the left rear bottom of the tire in. The right rear, in that mode, you're going to probably want 20 degrees of angle. So when it's all done and said, we always use the rule of thumb as about 15 degrees angle. Seems to be pretty equal on the static position, because when you do load it in dynamics, you lose a little angle on the left rear, you gain a little angle on the right rear, and the shock absorbers are taking and pushing that weight towards each tire, still keeping the car going. Kevin, I seen your little note on Facebook the other day. Appreciate that. Seen racing, you had some issues, and then you kind of got that solved, so that was pretty cool. What could cause a brake floater rod to cam over? I'll let you answer this one, Chad. Anyway, bar is at recommended chassis manufacturer's length, and there's only one chassis mount. Too much left rear drive, add more length to the bar. Well, I'd add more length to the bar.
For sure. I don't know what hole you're in on the brake floater. There's 2 holes there. Maybe go up to the top one if you're in the bottom one on the brake floater side. But, the old myth is, does it know where the caliper's placed? And it doesn't. You just need to lengthen the bar so it doesn't cam over. If you're letting more chain out or doing things like that, getting the axle to fall down farther could compromise that standard location, I guess you would call it. But yeah, you can just keep lengthening that bar until it doesn't cam over. I'm surprised there's only one spot on the chassis though. That's doesn't seem quite right because you use the same holes as the 4-link holes probably. So, or you could lower at one and use a 4-link hole with some
Yeah,
face.
that's what our GRT cars are. There's not a separate bracket for them. I mean, it's all in line with where you use the same holes. IMC stock car running a 100-pound left rear spring and a 225 right rear spring. About 175 pounds of bite on a 3/8 mile racetrack. Car is good on corner entry and through the middle, but it's a little too free coming off the corner. Thinking about putting a 150 left rear spring in to get it up off the corner better. Your thoughts? Well, once again, with a modified car, we run chains and we run sliders, so we can preload a spring, take a soft spring and preload the heck out of it to make it work. The problem where you guys run into on a stock car, you put that soft spring in there and you still can't do quite the same preload. Answer to your question to make it short, I would agree. I would try a 150 in there. More spring, in my opinion, in those cars, I still believe a little bit more spring in the left rear helps the car drive off the corner. The stiffer spring gets the weight. If you have a real soft spring, it's going to compress and not load weight to the tire. When you can't, the softer spring is, the idea behind it is to get trailing arm angle in it. Well, that helps to a point, but still, your 175 pounds of bite, the actual tire with a softer spring is compressing, is probably not seeing that actually in racing mode. Do you think a heavy tube left rear is a good or bad for your UMP modified? Well, I'm assuming you're talking about an axle tube. And if that is the case, and whatever the rules allow, I would run a heavier tube on the left rear. I mean, unless you run a lot of racetracks that are pretty rough. I mean, nowadays, there's some racetracks that are still kind of rough, but most of the time, everybody likes the racetrack slicker because it takes less toll on the racetrack. And if the racetrack is slick, that old adage of a little bit more load on the left rear tire is definitely good for traction. There's more reasons than why they outlawed that, putting weight on the left rear axle, safety reasons, but still, it was just one of those situations where it wasn't a good deal. So people went to that stiffer tube. Dang, flies irritating me. In a hobby stock, when going up in spring height, do you believe you need to soften the spring as well, or will that take drive away? Well, in my opinion, if you soften the spring's going to do more work, which in turn might not load the tire as much. So I hesitate in softening the spring because you got to remember your car's rolling over on the right rear. If you soften your left rear, there's already a certain amount of weight loss to begin with on that left rear tire. So I still think we need to keep a certain amount of spring in there. That's just my opinion. Levi, pros and cons to zero indexing birdcage on IMCA modified spring behind. There you go, Chad.
I mean, I would run it all the time. The zero index takes the bind out of the suspension. It allows you to run more drive angle, more chain. It's just one of them things where, again, there's so many misconceptions, so many different ways to do it. But the way that we like to do it is with the bars moved and 1 inch clocked and the cage set 0 to 3 at ride height. I think, I would run it all the time. increased left rear traction, so it has a tendency to make the car feel free on entry. But it's one of them things you got to say, I'm going to rebalance my package and stick to this, and and find a way to rebalance the car and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I've not found anything that would be bad about the zero indexing thing. Everything that we have done, I felt has gained traction. The big thing is and Chad probably highlighted on this misconception of what's the definition of zero. That's where people get confused on this thing. The biggest thing is not camming over. You got to keep it, like Chad said, you got to keep it so you don't get that suspension bind. The traction's there. It's all about the bar angles and where the bar angles are located at, and getting the car up on the bars is the key. And I found that the car, it might have to have a little bit different setup, and the driver might have to drive it just a little bit differently. But once he gets used to it, I think it's daylight and dark. I don't know. I don't even think I have a customer, at least a current customer that I'm aware of, that's not running the zero index. In fact, I do have one customer that's not. And we kind of coached him along, and he was actually going to try that this weekend, and I haven't actually heard from him to see how that went. Okay, I have a hobby stock metric car, and it has good forward bite, but it's always loose going into the turn. And I have to use brakes to keep it straight while I'm going into the turn. This loose condition will continue into the middle of the turn. I have changed the left rear weight percentage, front stagger to 0, 1,100 pound and 900 pound springs in the front, 11-inch 275 and 150 in the rear, Bilstein shocks, American Racer tires. To me, it feels like I'm not getting the side bite. Well, you really have a lot of split in the rear springs. With that soft right rear spring, it's going to feel like you don't have a lot of side bite because the spring's not actually putting the load into the tire. What you're focusing on is your traction up off the corner, which is great. But you're really sacrificing with that much split in the rear springs. I'd close that split up a little bit. I'd try a 200-pound right rear spring. It's not going to come off the corner as good, but I think you'd like the way it gets in a lot better. It's going to be a lot snugger getting in. And throttle response in the middle is going to help the car stay underneath you good. I think it would be pretty good. Wong says, why don't we use independent rear suspension? Well, that's a good idea. I think it's too confusing for what we're doing. I mean, the cost of an independent rear suspension would be quite a bit. The maintenance would be quite a bit more. So in my opinion, for dirt racing, I don't think it's feasible. Robbie, how can I get more side bite out of a leaf spring Camaro street stock? Well, one of the things that you can do, the biggest thing that you can do with leaf springs is the lowering blocks, the blocks between the leaf spring and the housing. You can change, like if you wanted a little bit more side bite, I'd have a 2-inch on the left rear and a 1-inch on the right rear, or none on the right rear and an inch depending on what your right eyes need to be. But I would close that gap up there. And try a little softer compression shock. Might not be a bad idea to get the car over on that left rear. One thing you don't want to forget, in 42 days is the Harris Clash. One of the biggest, baddest IMCA racing events at the Deer Creek Speedway in Spring Valley, Minnesota. It's a must to see, must to come and attend. And I tell you what, I'm supporting I think it's my 2019 shirt tonight. And we've got one of our great sponsors on here with us. It's the Race of Champions sponsor. And I'll tell you what, that deal's a special event. All those guys are champions. They've all won the Harris Clash, either in a sport mod or in a modified. Like I said, last or a couple of weeks ago, we've got 2 young guys that are going to be moving into that deal. Cody Thompson and Doug Smith. And of course, Doug was last year's IMCA national champion in the sport mod division. Cody and him actually ran that deal pretty close all year long between running for the national championship. So they're definitely winners. They're going to add to that program, and we don't have an additional one to add from the modified side because Ethan Dotson was a 2-time winner. He's already in that show, and he won last year. He stands a pretty good chance. Ethan could very well be our first 3-time champion of this whole deal. We've never, ever had a 3-time champion at the Harris Clash. So in 30 years of running it, we've never had a 3-time champion. We have some 2-timers, definitely some legends in the thing that have won this thing twice. So it's a good event. It's going to be on IMCA TV for those of you out in Pennsylvania. Make sure you log on to imcatv.com and watch that thing. It's a hell of a show. And I can't wait. It's just 42 days. That's almost a month. Man, I'm excited. And it takes a lot to get me excited. Tightening and loosening the left front chain and or right rear chain. What does it do? 3-link B mod. Well, tightening the left rear chain will actually take a little bit of bite out of the side bite out of the right rear, but it gives you more traction on the left rear, because when the car goes to roll over to the right rear and you throttle it up and it starts to pick that left front up, then all of a sudden that chain comes into play, and now all of a sudden it's picking up an 80-pound weight. When that happens, it transfers the weight back to the left rear, so it gets you off the corner better. Loosening it up, say for example, if you're too tight on throttle, on throttle, when you get back on the throttle, loosening that chain up a little bit would help get the car on the right rear more. It's kind of like Chad talked about, feeding the heat on that right rear. Getting that right rear to get a little bit more bite definitely would help that. I'm very cautious about trying to tie the right rear chain down. The problem with that being is, unless you have a perfectly smooth glass type racetrack, tightening the chain down will give you more traction. But if you hit a rut or a hole or whatever, it can make the car kind of a handful. So you got to be very careful. I don't actually put any preload in my right rear. I set my right rear so that it doesn't come off the spring. And that's something that I don't let me forget. I need to talk to you about, Chad. Right rear spring. Anyway, so that would be my suggestion. Hi, Joey. We need to get our old buddy KS on this show here. I was going to call him to actually get him on this show, and got busy, and so I hope you're keeping him out of trouble. I know it probably takes more than you, but keep up the good work if that's what you're doing. Chad, when you spread your right rear bars out from 5 to 5.5 from standard on the birdcage, do you maintain the same bar angles as the standard setup?
Yeah, I really like spreading the bars on the right rear cage, getting them all the way out, but you got to definitely keep the same angle. When you slow that action or the whole indexing of the right rear cage, the car's gonna want to lay there. So I'm a big fan of spreading the bars and putting a stiffer spring in there and actually increasing some drive angle there to get right rear traction, because we do all this stuff, the zero index and everything on the left rear to gain left rear traction, and then generally you're loose in and I think the right rear kind of gets avoided, and that spreading the bars, I really like doing that with a standard right rear, and then you can possibly increase the weight of the spring also. So definitely some tuning advantages there to the right rear suspension for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's something that I've seen, like Chad said, we spent so much time working on the left rear, we tend to overlook some of the rest of the car. And there's 4 corners on that car that we need to have balance to do what it needs to do. And I think spreading what you were talking about, what you're doing on the right rear complements the stuff that we're doing on the left rear, because some of the stuff that we do on the left rear takes away from the right rear. And when you change those angles, you're actually, what you're doing is you're putting angle in it, which is a good thing, but you're slowing the motion down, because the problem is when we put angle in something, if we don't slow the motion down, it's too quick, it reacts too quickly. So it's a good idea. Thoughts on the upper bar angle on the left on a metric 4-link. Obviously, changing them will change roll center, but when should you be adjusting this? Dylan, I'm not really sure I've got an answer for that one. I've not had a lot of experience with that because, of course, you know, where we're at out here in the Midwest, you can't do any of that stuff on the left or on the rear end. But once again, I think stock, I mean, in my opinion, the stock angles work pretty good. I would concentrate, if you're going to play with something, I would play with the rear, or the lowers, I mean. The lowers are going to gain you traction. The right rears are kind of, the uppers are pretty much your panhard bar in a sense. So, what does moving the right rear bar on the birdcage do to the top, to the car from the top to the bottom on a sport mod? Well, Austin, moving the right rear, the closer you get it to the cage, changes the reaction time, and what it actually ends up doing is it ends up putting more traction in the car. We've played with that quite a bit. The biggest thing is if you do that, it's important to maintain that right rear angle. And when I'm talking about right rear angle, I'm talking about the bar angle. It's important to, you know, like if you run 5 to 7 degrees, if you raise that up on the cage, you're going to want to raise it on the frame, because otherwise it's liable to make the car too tight, because it will put traction in the car. Chadwick, while on the chain topic, how about the left rear chain? What effect does more or less chain have on a 4-bar car? Go ahead, Chad. I'll let you take that one.
Generally, you want to shorten the chain in the mud and you want to lengthen it in the slick.
Yeah, because it's all about keeping the bar angle in the car. You know, I believe, and Kelly Shyrock swears by this, and I completely agree with him 100%. There's a sweet spot in the steer in those cars, and you got to find that sweet spot in your car on how far that left rear moves forward. And too much chain will let it move too far forward, get you too much hike, to the point where you end up with either too much dynamic angle, and then of course it's the old adage, whatever comes up has to kind of come down a little bit when you get into the corner. So you got to be a little bit careful on that. But in my opinion, like Chad said, more angle when it's dry, because we need that car to get the angle and get the steer. A lot of people used to think
it's a wedge tuning too. So when the chain's shorter, there's a more static wedge in the car, so it'll turn in the mud. That's the
Yep, no doubt.
The chain's important. You're doing 3 things, 4 things there, timing everything out. So
exactly, yeah, it's a crucial deal. And like I said, I encourage people to try different things, but once again, you'll find that sweet spot where you really like it, and you might not. You know, you might change 1/4 of an inch, and 1/4 of an inch on that left rear change a mile.
Pretty big.
How much right top bar angle is too much on a 4-bar car? A-mod, will it help the car push, will not push on the throttle?
Definitely going to free it up.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's basically going to make you free off, but I mean, if you're looking to get more drive angle, then raise it up on the cage to slow that transition down.
Yeah, that would probably be my suggestion. If you decide to go more angle, when we're talking more angle, we're statically, we're still talking 20 degrees. Are they going more than that?
there's a few guys that are testing the waters there, and like I said, if you're going to test the waters, you got to spread it and slow the cage down so that when you get that transition and the wheelbase change through the middle of the corner, it's not so drastic.
Correct. So, statically, that 20-degree range, 18 always was a staple, but if you went and moved it up on the frame and on the cage, you could definitely push that envelope, 20, 22 degrees and probably be fine. Okay, got a list here. People, RTI shirts. Patrick Davis, Gary Glander, Jimmy Hager, Alex Crawford. Wehrs shirts. Justin Neff, Jim Bloom, Cody Webb, Levi Smith. Ball joint tool, Jacob Poole, P-O-E-L. Angle finders, Rob Mosley. Okay, guys, message the guys that won the Wehrs stuff, message Chad on Facebook so that you can get your name and address and the size of your t-shirts and whatever the case is. Same thing for the guys with the RTI shirts and this nice angle gauge. Make sure you email us at racetechinfo. What is the actual ad? racetechinfo.com?
It's Facebook.
Facebook, go ahead. Never mind, just Facebook. So give us that information and we'll get that stuff sent out to you. So we're getting right there. We got about 3 more minutes. We got one more question we're going to answer. When string lining the left side tires using the Hammond setup plates, do you need to compensate for the left front camber? Should you only align left side tires with 0 left front camber? I don't. I have the car lined up, and what I do is I line the car up in the center of the hub. Because if you've got camber in the left front, which you should, if you're in the center of the hub, you're pretty neutral. And then right in the center of the tire on the left rear, that's where I actually line it up. The biggest thing is just lining it up square. We got one more question. Oh, 2 more questions. Okay, what's your thoughts of moving the pull bar out in front on the rear end side, just to say like 2 inches from the gear end surface? Well, it depends on how much you're getting for actual movement, Austin. When we were getting quite a bit of movement, we moved it ahead because the magic thing still is to get to the point where you're close to center. When the car pulls, and if your pull bar is pulling 1 inch, you want to make sure that 1 inch is more in the center so that it doesn't change angle. It's always pulling into the angle was always the idea that we had. If you go too far behind or too far in front, it still doesn't pull into the angle to that point where it gets almost to that 0 straight up motion. Got a Victory Sport mod and having troubles getting the left rear to hike up and pushing bad on the corner. Do you think a stiff gas shock would help? Well, Gage, I do think a stiff gas shock would definitely help you. I don't argue that fact. I think it's important that you really go through the car. I'd put the car up on jack stands. I'd take my lower control arms off, my upper control arms. I'd go through that car with a fine-tooth comb to make sure nothing is binding, because that can happen. And I've had cars that have had a left front lower A-frame where the bushing galled up and bound up, and it was kept the car from getting over on the right front and couldn't get bar angle in it. So go through all of that. And then once again, put your trailing arm angles, your right rear probably around 7 degrees and your left rear in a static motion around 25 degrees. And then if you still need some more help, give us a call and Bobby can fix you up with a shock. What's your thoughts on moving the pull bar out in front of the rear end side just to say, I think we just had that one.
You just did that one.
I did that one, yes. Okay, guys. Well, it's been a great show. I sure appreciate everybody coming on tonight. Another great show. Very impressed. You guys all made our 40th episode stellar. I'm very happy about that. So have a great weekend. Do some good racing this weekend and keep us informed on what you're doing. And we'll see you 2 weeks from today. Thank you.